What we've seen over the past 18 months is a major disruptive shift in the B2B landscape. Previously, we were used to working in an environment of abundance, living under the abundance mindset, and that was completely different than what we're seeing right now. The venture capital world and pretty much everyone else were attuned to the hockey stick growth, just increasing user growth, no matter the consequences, no matter the customer acquisition cost of acquiring customers, no matter the payback. And it was all the means of acquiring total domination of a space, regardless of how expensive it is. So that's kind of what we were used to up until more or less the end of 2022. However, what we were seeing since is that ever since Elon took over X and he's essentially slashed 75% of the workforce, and then Mark Zuckerberg said, well, we are moving to the era of efficiency, and then Sundar from Google said the same, and then Microsoft did the same, and everyone more or less followed suit. We quickly understood that we are moving to a new era of efficiency. And that's not really surprising, to be completely honest. If you take a look at Brooks' Law, for example, in software engineering, just adding more and more and more people to a new project, that's not really speeding up the project. It's slowing the project down because you have more communication, more coordination, more peer reviews, more additional reviews going on. And that entire process is just making the environment more cumbersome. There's an ancient story from back in the day that essentially says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you need a team. And we have been operating in an environment of abundance where we kept hiring and adding more people to the crew. So what we saw that businesses are now observing is they are slashing their own teams. They are moving to a more consistent, to a more predictable environment. They are reassessing the growth channels that they were previously using. And they are looking for ways to make an optimal, self-sustaining, profitable environment from everything that they're doing themselves. And moving from a complete abundance mindset to a contraction, I don't necessarily see it as anything bad. And there are different forces behind that. So first and foremost, if you live in an abundance mindset, everyone has everything and it's all expanding, it's expanding quickly, it's really uncontrollable. The reason that the Fed is demanding that 2% growth rate, the 2% inflation rate, is because it's predictable. They actually don't really have a clear answer on why 2%. It's not really set in stone per se. Someone once said that it's 2%. They were trailing to 2%. They know how to control it and how to contain that. And that's why it's 2%. We may eventually move to an environment when 0% is fine or 4% is fine. But 2% is kind of the holy grail that the Fed is really moving forward to. And what we saw over the past couple years of abundance mindset is that certain ecosystems and certain environments are taking advantage of that situation. Regardless of whether that's good or bad, it's creating an equal environment where it's really hard to predict what's going on. This, for example, is leading to more expensive goods and services. Even though inflation rate moved to 9%, 10%, 12%, 14%, even in some countries, the actual consumer basket, when you go shopping in Walmart, for certain specific items has moved upwards of 50%. So even if we discuss that the inflation is 10% or so, the actual cost of living when you need to feed yourself and your family is oftentimes 30, 40, 50% instead. When you are talking about abundance mindset, abundance is not really moving equally across all fronts. Certain jobs may be rewarded with 10%, 20%, even 30% upsells. So you're getting a higher salary. But other jobs are not really following suit with the same pace. Problem with abundance is that lack of equality and the fact that the middle class is growing larger, but essentially people are either in the upper bracket, closer to rich entrepreneurs and Fortune 1000 founders and stuff, or actually in the lower class where it's really hard to survive because real estate is becoming more expensive, food is becoming more expensive, transportation is becoming more expensive, and it's really hard to accommodate all that. So when I'm talking about abundance is really easy to leverage and really abuse, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So when we take a look at moving back to the old normal, it's actually taking a look at what works, optimizing for efficiency, providing the types of services and products and goods, and not really living as if no matter what you do, it's going to be all right. Because what we definitely saw over the past several years is that customer service went down and people weren't really caring as much about their jobs. The lack of complacency was pretty clear, or rather people felt like no matter what happens at their workplace, they can always find another job. There's too much demand. They didn't really care what they were doing. There was a lot of slacking on the workspace and low efficiency and all that stuff. So in other words, of course, it's not really great if that lack of abundance if that abundance randomly disappears. It gets really hard in a couple of years to find a real job where you're in demand and your skills are up to date and you're doing anything meaningful. And at the same time, everything outside is becoming more expensive and uncontrollable. So you suddenly lack the realization of what the world outside looks like. And most people actually this year, they woke up in a completely new environment, not understanding what's happening outside.